Your biggest enemy isn't a lack of discipline. It's not a lack of willpower. It's not a lack of motivation. Your biggest enemy is how well you know yourself. The more you understand yourself, the easier it becomes for your own mind to sabotage you. And that's the most unsettling paradox I've ever studied about human behavior. The person who reads self-help books, goes to therapy, understands their own patterns, often gets more stuck than someone who knows none of that. Why? Because the brain is way smarter than your willpower. And today, I'm going to show you exactly how it does that. A friend of mine, I'll call him Sam, spent 2 years complaining about how much he hated his job. Every lunch, it was the same conversation. He wanted to start a business, had an idea, knew what he needed to do, but he never did it. I asked him once, "Man, what's missing?" He gave me the most honest answer I've ever heard. "I think I'm afraid of finding out the idea is actually good, because then I wouldn't have any more excuses." Did you catch that? He was afraid of finding out the idea was good. Not that it was bad. That would have been easy to deal with. His fear was the opposite. Because if it was good, the only thing standing between him and change was himself. And that's exactly what psychology calls experiential avoidance. You're not avoiding the task. You're avoiding what the task might reveal about you. If I try and fail, what does that mean? That I'm not good enough? That I've been fooling myself my whole life? That the people who doubted me were right? These are questions your brain doesn't even fully put into words. It just opens YouTube and changes the subject. Procrastination is the symptom. Fear is the disease. And as long as you keep treating the symptom, pushing yourself, blaming yourself, making goal lists, the cause stays right there, untouched, waiting for the next time you open your notebook. When you put off the same thing for the 10th time, there's a voice that says, "This time it's for real. I'll start tomorrow, next week, when I finish this, when things calm down." You've said that before, more than once. And I'm not saying this to judge you. I'm saying it because this pattern has a much deeper cause than a lack of willpower. Procrastination, most of the time, is fear in disguise. Fear of failing. If you never really try, you never really fail. There's a twisted logic to it, but it makes sense to your nervous system. Keeping the possibility alive feels safer than risking disappointment. Then there's the fear of being judged. By others, but especially by yourself. What happens if you try and you're not good enough? What does that say about who you are? But there's one fear people rarely admit. The fear of succeeding. Because succeeding changes everything. It changes expectations, relationships, who you are. And your mind, which knows the current territory well, prefers the familiar over the unknown, even if the unknown is better. So it uses procrastination as a shield. Not to hurt you, to protect you from an exposure that still doesn't feel safe. Now I want to tell you about a pattern that's more subtle and more destructive than simple procrastination. It's when you actually start. You really do. The first few days go well. You feel that momentum, that clarity. And then, for no apparent reason, you stop. You switch priorities. Something urgent comes up. Life rearranges itself in a way that pushes what mattered to the side. From the outside, it looks like coincidence, but it's not. There's a name for it: unconscious self-sabotage. And it doesn't act with intention. It acts with surgical precision, quietly, right when you're closest to something that actually matters. The root is almost always far from the present. Old experiences, messages you absorbed about what you deserve, what it's safe to want, what happens when things go too well. Maybe someone important in your life failed right when things were going well. Maybe growing up came at a cost. Maybe succeeding at something brought consequences your mind still carries. Those experiences create beliefs that operate in the background, outside your awareness. And in the present, when you get close to something that activates those beliefs, your system goes into protection mode. Not with obvious fear, but with distractions, with made-up urgencies, with sudden exhaustion, with the urge to do anything except the one thing that matters. And the story you're left with is, "I don't have discipline." But that's not true. What's actually happening is that a part of you is avoiding the emotional exposure that comes with growth, because growth requires seeing yourself in a new way. It requires letting go of a version of yourself that, even if it's limiting, is familiar. And the cycle repeats. You start, sabotage, stop, blame yourself, promise again. Not because you're weak, because you're being protected by patterns that once made sense. There's a contradiction that lives inside a lot of people. You want to change, you talk about changing, you feel the dissatisfaction clearly, but when a real opportunity to change shows up, a decision, a moment, a chance, something pulls back. You hesitate, you let it pass, and then you wonder why. The human brain has a deep bias toward what's familiar. The unknown, even when it's better, triggers an alarm signal. Not because it's dangerous, but because it's uncertain. And uncertainty to your nervous system feels like risk. So what's familiar, even if it causes suffering, even if it brings dissatisfaction, feels safer than what's new? And that's how silent stagnation happens. You stay in the same place, not because you lack ability, but because the emotional cost of leaving feels higher than the cost of staying. That's not a character flaw, it's neurology. It's your brain doing what it was trained to do, preserve what's predictable. The problem is, predictable and good aren't always the same thing. There's something that rarely comes up in conversations about procrastination, and I think it's one of the most underestimated factors: exhaustion. Not the kind that comes from a bad night's sleep, the kind that comes from living with an overloaded mind, having too many open decisions, unresolved conversations, unnamed fears, worries constantly running in the background. When your mind is like that, taking action becomes physically hard. It's not a lack of motivation, it's a lack of executive capacity. You know what you need to do, you want to do it, and still you stay stuck. Because the energy you'd need to act is being drained by the weight of carrying all of that. And in that state, your brain looks for immediate relief, something that reduces the tension right now. Not tomorrow, not in a week when the project is done, now. That's where distractions come in. Passive consumption, small pleasures that don't carry any emotional cost. They're not the problem, they're your system's response to an overload no one is addressing. The cycle that forms is brutal. Exhaustion leads to procrastination. Procrastination leads to guilt. Guilt leads to more exhaustion. And the loop feeds itself. Not because you're disorganized, because you're carrying more than any system can process without a cost. The brain wasn't built for the long term. It was built for right now. And when you weigh doing something hard that will pay off in months against doing something easy that feels good in seconds, your automatic system will almost always pick the second. Not because you're impulsive or lack vision, but because that's the default wiring. Immediate pleasure activates faster and stronger circuits than future rewards. And every time you choose the easy option, that pathway gets more reinforced, more automatic. You're not being weak, you're being human. The problem is, this pattern slowly pulls you away from everything that matters. Not all at once, gradually, through small choices that seem harmless. Until one day, you look back and realize you've been standing still while time moved on. Not because you lacked ambition, but because your system was on autopilot, choosing the immediate over the meaningful. And then there's perfectionism, which isn't really about wanting to do things well. It's about not being able to start because good never feels good enough. It's the person who overplans, reorganizes before taking action, waits for the right moment, the perfect conditions, the right mood. From the outside, it looks like responsibility, but underneath, it's a block. Because the perfect moment never comes, and while you wait, nothing happens. The fear of making mistakes becomes so strong that doing nothing feels safer than doing something imperfect, and life gets stuck on pause. What I want to leave you with isn't advice, it's a perspective. Everything you've heard so far points in the same direction. The problem was never discipline, it was protection. It was a system trying to keep you safe in the only way it knew how. And when you truly understand that, not just intellectually, but as an experience, something starts to shift. Not all at once, but it begins. Awareness of the pattern is already the first step. Small actions that don't have to be perfect start breaking the cycle. Consistency doesn't come from force, it comes from understanding. And little by little, gently, your life starts to unlock. If you liked this video, hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. See you soon.